Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 33rd episode of Magicians Without Borders Conversations. My name is Carlos López. I am so glad that you are joining us today because we have a great episode. We're going to talk about a children's circus that was started in Afghanistan with a great guest who is he does many things, but he's a juggler, Guinness record world holder, and he helped start that children's circus in Afghanistan. So we're gonna have a great talk with him. But before we start, as always, I want to remind you of the different ways that you can support the work we do. So the first one is go to patreon.com/MWB. That's a way that you can support us. So if you go to patreon.com/MWB, you can select different ways that you can support us, and you're going to get rewards for doing so. So this is a little bit different than a donation, but it's kind of a support for the creations that we do with our students around the world. And the other thing I wanted to remind you is if you want to learn magic, go to learn.magicianswithoutborders.com and you can have access to a great virtual magic course that was created by our founder, Tom Verner, who teaches 13 tricks, and you can put on a 30-minute show by yourself after you go through this course. It's self-paced, very easy to do a video course, so you can go and get it at learn.magicianswithoutborders.com, and the proceedings from that go straight to our program to help our education programs around the world. And as always, remember, our mailbag episode is the last Wednesdays of each month. So if you have questions or comments, please send them to podcast at magicianswithoutborders.com or tweet them at magicianswb. So today we're going to talk about the circus. And I got some great stories that I want to tell everyone, including Tom Verner, because you haven't heard him. Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm great, and I am very excited to be here tonight with my old friend Zach, and he's an amazing fella, and we're going to have a marvelous conversation tonight. I just wanted to, was there a bad connection on your end, or was that on my end? Because you kept freezing.
Okay, so Probably on both ends. But
Okay. So
we're
I
gonna
was
figure
just wondering whether it was my end, but I'm okay right now. It's
you are
fine.
fine.
Okay,
You
great.
look great, and I can hear you perfectly.
Okay, good. And the number 33 is a wonderful kind of magical number. So here we are, a
I agree.
magical episode, number 33. Um,
33. So before we bring Zach on, I want to tell you a story, Tom, about the circus, right? And it's a story that I you probably have not heard me tell it firsthand. So I wanted to share it with you, and is that it's a story that goes like this. He he was with his family in a circus like this one in the picture, right? And then the master of ceremonies, came out and said, "Hey, I need 5 kids to come down here and sit on my friend, an elephant." So that little kid stood up, grabbed his sister by the hand, and ran down the stairs, right? And got into the stage, right? And then she put his sister in front of him, and she was the fourth child on that line. So they kept putting kids on the elephant. They got to his sister. They put the sister on the elephant. And at that moment, another kid ran to the stage. And then the master of ceremonies turned to that kid and the other one, and he was confused. The kid that ran with with his sister, he said to the master of ceremonies, "Hey, you know what? Eh, I'm going to let the other kid go." And he turned to the kid and said, "Hey, you can go on." And the master of ceremonies was confused. And he said, "Hey, kid, I need to talk to you after the show." So the kid said, "Okay, fine." He went back, sat with his family, and saw the whole show. At the end of the show, when they were exiting the tent with his family, he saw all the acrobats and the actors and everyone that was on the circus doing like a little line, just thanking people for showing up for the show. And when he was walking out with his family, the master of ceremonies noticed him and he said, "Hey, kid, you were the one that gave your place to the other kid, right?" And he said, "Yes, it was me." He said, "Come here because I have a surprise for you." He took him and his family backstage, and he actually got them to take a picture by themselves on the elephant. And right there, sitting on that elephant with my sister, I realized that if I did something good for other people, then I could get rewarded in a different way. And I've kept that picture
oh,
because that memory for me is super, super important. So that's me. That's little me on the on the elephant. That's
wow.
my sister, and this one is my dad. This one is my dad, who is you know him, Tom. He's almost your age, and he's
Yeah.
right here. He looks young. He's probably younger than me in this picture. My dad is. But
Wow. What a wonderful,
yeah, go ahead, Tom.
just such a wonderful story and a wonderful picture, and that you've kept it all these years. It's amazing.
It's wonderful, and that actually has shaped my character. When I perform, I want to perform with all the colorfulness of the circus, and that's how my character is. If you see, this is a theater show that we put on, and you see the backdrop, lots of colors, lots of hats, lots of things
Yeah.
happening, right? And then when I was older, I realized that this is actually a picture, a representation of data that's not so cool for me, right? In Colombia, 87.4% of families have not gone to the circus, right?
Wow.
That's the red area. Only 12.6% of families have gone to the circus. So that means that there's a lot of families that have not had the experience that I had, right? And that shaped the way that I wanted to spend my adulthood, right? And that eventually took me to magic,
Wow.
eventually took me to Magicians Without Borders and the work that we do. But I want to tie it in a little bit more, Tom, because remember in 2013, we were doing the work that we do in magic, right, with the kids of El Paraíso in the slums of Bogota, Colombia. And I remember I was there on a class, and I got a phone call. And on the phone, it was I didn't have a smartphone then yet, but it was a dumb phone. But it said, +1, right? And I was like, I'm not expecting a call from abroad. So I hung up, right? Then I got the same call, same number. I'm like, this is odd. So I picked up, right? And I picked up in Spanish. Hello, ¿qué pasó? Right? And then on the other line, it was a lady saying, hi, is this Carlos? Right? And I'm like, sí, soy yo. She's like, can you speak English? I'm like, yes, I can speak English. And I remember that she said, hey, I'm calling you from Montreal, from the offices of Cirque du Soleil, because we're traveling with Varecai to Bogota, Colombia, and we've seen the work that you do. And in 2013, we're going to present that show, Varecai, in Bogota, Colombia, and we want you to take the kids that you work with to the show. And we actually did that, right? We went with this is 50 kids from 5 different NGOs, or little foundations from around Bogota, from the slums of Bogota, that they had the experience of going to Cirque du Soleil. For me, the best show that has ever stepped foot in Colombia. And if you see closely, can you find yourself? This is like a Find Waldo kind of thing. Can you find Tom?
Oh, yeah, I can see me way in the back there.
Yeah, you had a cane back then because you had a thing on your thigh, remember?
Oh, yeah, I had that automobile accident, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that was such a great experience, right? That the kids were just, perplexed. They never seen anything like this. And this is a little video of how one of our students, who is now a grown woman, what she had to say when she was, I think she was 13 years old here. So just take a look at how Tamara recalls her interaction with the circus.
Acá estamos con la Fundación Bella Flor y quería preguntarles a todos cómo les pareció. Entonces, dime tú, Tamara, ¿cómo te pareció el show?
Excelente.
Excelente. ¿Qué fue lo que más te gustó?
Lo último.
¿El final? Sí. ¿Y a ti, Daniel?
Todo.
¿Qué fue? Dime algo que viste.
Lo último,
¿Qué fue lo último que yo no lo vi? ¿Qué fue?
eso de todo lo que tenía que ver con la gimnasia.
Mucha gimnasia. Bueno, quiero preguntarles a ustedes a todos, ¿cuándo fue la última vez que vieron algo así? Nunca lo habían visto. Como algunos o la mayoría no lo habían visto, quisiéramos que agradeciéramos al Circo del Sol, que fue los que nos dieron las boletas. ¿Sí? Entonces quiero que a la cuenta de 3 gritemos gracias Circo del Sol, ¿vale? Gracias Circo del Sol, ¿vale? A la 1, a las 2 y a las 3.
¡Gracias, Circo del Sol!
¿Vale? Y como esto fue...
That's such an amazing view, because you saw the kids, how small they look, because those are the kids.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And Tamara is now a grown woman and in university and teaching a magic group of her own and performing for corporations around the world on Zoom. It's just spectacular. It's amazing.
It's wonderful. And then the kids were saying, like I asked them, when was the last time that you saw something like this? And they all in unison said, never. We've never seen something like that.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate enough that Cirque du Soleil actually called us 2 years after, when Corteo, another show of them, came here to Colombia as well, and we got the chance to take 30 kids from 3 foundations to once again experience that. So yeah. I think this is a perfect segue for our guest. So I want you, Tom, to tell us a little bit more about Zach Warren before we bring him in. So how did you meet him? Tell us a little story about him before we bring him on.
I have to ask him how we met. I remember doing some kind of a presentation performance in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Zach being there in the audience and introducing himself afterwards and us connecting. And but I have to check that out with him tonight. But we have done work together with Magicians Without Borders in El Salvador, and then did an amazing tour together in India, where he also taught juggling to our students over there. And he did a wonderful fundraiser to send me to Afghanistan, and it became a tension with my family because the war kind of heated up again, and they didn't want me to go. And but I ended up going to the Afghan refugee camps on the Iran-Afghan border. But I would love to see the circus we're going to hear about tonight. And Zach is just a marvelous person. We're not going to have time to hear all the stories, but he and I created something that used to be done in the Middle Ages called the Fool's Mass, where the fool in the village idiot, as it's sometimes called, would be the priest who would say the mass. And we did that. We recreated that in Harvard's chapel at Harvard University. And he and I, and we might be able to talk.
Oh, yes. We will be able to talk about it if we get Tom back. But
situations together.
Okay. So, we lost you for a moment there, Tom, but you're here. And we're going to introduce Zach Warren. So, Zach, hello, welcome. So nice to have you.
Hello, Carlos. Hello, Tom. Thanks for bearing with me.
Hello. I see you're on the move as you always are. It's great.
It'd be better if this was a circus truck or something like that, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's so good to see you. Yeah. So how about that story of when we met? Is there any truth to my recollection?
You're right on target. It was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was at Harvard Divinity School as a graduate student, and I actually had a date, and I was on a date that night when we met, and the date was the one who had identified that there was a Magicians Without Borders event, and I think she invited me to go, and I'm so grateful to her for that. I mean, the date was okay, but meeting you was really fantastic. And yes, but I just remember just being honest. I was just really moved by hearing about the work of Magicians Without Borders, and I had at the time planned a trip to Afghanistan. I had been invited to teach juggling. I think I hadn't yet gone, or maybe I'd gone for a summer. But anyway, it's 2005, and I went then to teach in I know, right? Yeah, which is amazing because I've been 28 for the past 12 years. Anyway, so yeah, then I went to Afghanistan to work with the circus. I was invited to teach juggling there, and then just the overlap between Magicians Without Borders and circus skills, specifically educational or social circus, as it's now called, it just has a lot of overlap. But the work that the stories and the work that you do, Tom, are just, amazing. And Carlos, I'm so delighted that you're working with the Magicians Without Borders. And there's such a need to build a movement among practitioners of the arts who seek to do transformative work with others, whether it be in theater or circus arts or any of the related art form where there's skills involved. The development of a sense of resilience among youth and children, especially those who are in the hardest hit places, those who are orphans or refugees or, struggling in so many other ways. So thank you both for what you do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you also. And, that connection that happened on your wonderful date, I think that's a great shout out to the person that match made you. So that's pretty cool. But I want to know a little bit more, and our audience to know a little bit more about you, Zach. So just tell us a little bit more about you and how did you get into juggling in the first place?
So I started juggling in, my sister taught me in high school. And then in college, there was a juggling club that met on my college campus in the middle of the campus. I went to a small Quaker college, and to be honest, I just didn't want to do my homework. So I think that's how I kind of started. But it was, these people were doing just these absolutely amazing things with balls. It was just magical. And there's something that's just, it's so appealing to juggling is such an appealing art form. It's taken me years to figure out why that is. So that's how I got into juggling. And I continued doing it as a job, and later joined a small circus in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then when I went to divinity school, an opportunity arose to teach in Afghanistan, to start the juggling program for the Afghan children's circus there. And that was 2005. And it's since grown and developed and beyond my wildest imagination. So there's now an Afghan National Juggling Association. The International Juggling Association actually has a competition every year in Afghanistan. And we have some of the jugglers now there do things that I don't even see in the United States in terms of just the skill level, incredible skill level among children who are really young. And it's just remarkable. So, Tom, you will be going to Afghanistan, no doubt. It's just a matter of time. And I bet I can convince Janet to come. And Carlos, you too.
Man, I mean, I'm up for it. Like, if we set it up, I mean, I would love to go. I would definitely love to go. I think we've lost Tom. Maybe his connection might seem to be lost a little bit. So we're gonna get him back as soon as we can. But yes, Zach, I mean, I'll take you up on it. Let's try and make that happen when things get back a little bit more to normal, quote unquote. But then tell me about that experience of going to Afghanistan. Had you done any kind of social performance or performances with juggling in a setting different than just entertaining for people that were buying a ticket?
In the beginning, not really. I mean, I was doing juggling. I started out doing weddings, birthday parties. I did street performance, which is particularly challenging. Welcome back, Tom. I think I hear your voice.
Yeah.
But over and over, library shows and school shows, and what really caught my attention was the fact that juggling and circus arts and magic are all languages that connect with youth in a kind of innate, intuitive way. Like, you don't have to try, you don't even have to speak the same language. And actually, I had a really powerful experience once in Maryland when I realized that just the incredible power of it. I was in a campsite, and some children at a neighboring campsite were with their father camping, and their father passed away while they were there. And I was the first one to walk by, and they were just in tears, sobbing. And their father had passed away in the tent, and I think from a cardiac arrest. And we were probably an hour away for any ambulance to get there. So it was just me and the people I was there with and these children while they waited on an ambulance to come for their father. And in that moment, kids don't have a sense of permanence. They're dealing with their father's death in the moment, but and they were just sobbing and sort of lost. They didn't know how serious this was. They couldn't necessarily cope in the moment. And I talked to them and started juggling with them. And within about 15 minutes, they were laughing and playing. And obviously their father had passed away, and this is an incredibly serious event. But, they would have time to deal with that over the course of years. But in that moment, it was too much for them to deal with. And it made me wonder about how juggling or circus arts can be useful as a tool for resilience, not just as a way of distracting, but also as a way of helping kids to kind of do emotional self-regulation and coping with life's hardship.
For resilience, I love that.
Yeah, how how do we think that happens? Like learning how to juggle or learning how to. I usually connect all three things: learning, practicing, and performing. As three very different activities that teach different kind of skills. And how do you think that does? I mean, we talk about it in terms of teaching a sense of self-confidence and discipline and focus and self-esteem. And from those kind of places, people begin to develop, not just as performers, but as persons,
Yeah, and I think if you're a kid and all kids, but particularly kids who are orphaned or have grown up in a war situation, have a kind of they have wartime conditions, wartime mentality, a survival mentality, and in war, whatever you get is what you get. You don't deserve it; it just happens. Maybe you lose a family member. Maybe a bomb goes off and you've lost your family. Maybe your home is taken from you. What you get has nothing to do with proportionality or sense of control or mastery. And there's no coherence. But in learning a skill like juggling, there's a kind of coherence. You put in a certain amount of effort and you can do it. And when you learn it, it can't be taken from you. It's not like a bike or a possession that if you have it, it can be stolen. There's a randomness to war, whereas if you learn mastery of something, of a skill, there's a coherence and an integrity. There's a possession, if you will, almost an ownership of that, where it can't be stolen and it's not random. There's proportionality. You put in a certain amount of work, you learn a little bit. It's also extremely native, I think, to the children's imagination in that, in juggling, it's very binary when you first start, right? There's a ball, you throw it, you catch it. And then you learn that it's not as simple as that. There's timing, there's speed, there's the movement of objects in space. It's very complicated. And but it's a beautiful invitation for kids to go from a kind of binary thinking into a more nuanced, complex thinking about and using their body and a sense of mastery and all of that combined.
That's a simple sounding thing that you said, that I don't know how to do this and I work at it and then I can do it. That is just not a simple thing, is it? I mean, that as a life lesson is kind of amazing, that. Yeah, go ahead, Carlos.
You're there, but I wanted to comment on that. That I love the way that he, Zach put it as that's something that's, that's not transient. That it's there for. I mean, it's a skill that you have, and it's your skill, and it's not going to be. It cannot be taken away. And that's. I think that's so important. And in the work that we do, the way I see it with magic. And juggling also, and circus certainly as well, is that it also gives them a sense of belonging to something in the long run, right? When they stick with it, right, and they can be labeled as a magician or a juggler, it gives them a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and then they identify with others that it can be called by the same name, and that gives them kind of like a tribe, and they belong there also. And that I think that's so important for their development, that it expands from what they were given, right? Any situation that they were born into, right? They work towards and earned that new status, that new tribe.
I think it was W.C. Fields, who was, one of the great jugglers in the world, and developed, I guess, a bunch of different juggling tricks, like with cigar boxes. That one, I think he's credited with developing that. I'm not sure if that's true, but he said, as a comedian, he was so dependent on the audience, and it's so wicked being a comedian. I mean, they use that language like I died out there tonight. I don't know of any other profession that uses the kind of language that comedians use. I died out there, or I killed them, one way or the other. But W.C. Fields used to say he juggled every day of his life because he didn't need anyone to let him know that he was a great juggler, and that was a way that he returned to himself. And when things were going badly in his life, which they were, I mean, losing a child and all kinds of terrible things happened to him, he said, I would go back to juggling. And when you were talking about juggling, you can use rocks or walnut shells, or you don't need anything. And it's yours. It's an interesting skill. I never thought of it the way you talked about it, Zach. That's so amazing.
Pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, I think there is something to owning a skill, a mastery that's independent. I mean, to say, because it gives you a sense of identity. If I can perform a trick, or if I can, whether that be a juggling trick or a magic trick, I have a sense of identity and security from that. I'm the owner of that trick. It's almost like having it's like owning a passport almost, or there's something that, it's something that you own that can't be taken from you. I mean, you could certainly forget. I forget my tricks all the time. But although it's hard to unlearn basic juggling.
Mm.
Yeah, it's almost like bicycle, riding. Like you once you get back on it, it comes back real quick.
There's that muscle memory, or that it's in your body. It's not even in your body. It is your body in some way, in some,
There's a story that I sometimes tell about one of the students at the circus named Abida, who this is back in 2005 or so, and she was very, very shy, and she was, I think, an orphan, taken care of by some relatives, and she wore a headscarf really tightly wrapped around her head, and she didn't really socialize with the other girls very much. And then she started stilt walking for the first time, and the circus had some wooden stilts, and to wrap the children's feet into the stilts, there were bicycle tube tires. So it's rudimentary, probably a little uncomfortable. And so if you can imagine a 7-year-old, 6-year-old Afghan girl from a conservative family, hair wrapped and sort of frustrated look on her face, stepping up for the first time onto a 2-foot platform that would make her taller than all the other boys, all the girls, all the teachers, everyone. And so once she got up on these stilts, Abida became effectively a different person. She transformed into this extroverted, outgoing. She started shouting, making noise, and walking all around the circus compound in Kartese, Kabul. And so after a period of time, maybe it was 30 minutes, 45 minutes, it was time for her to come down so another child could have a turn.
Of course.
And said, come down, Abida. And she said, "Ne," and it means no, and just refused. And she kept walking around, and she kept, she'd run away from the teachers when they would come after her. And at some point, after a couple of hours, her feet started to bleed from these makeshift stilts and the bicycle tube tires, and I don't know, maybe she had splinters as well. I mean, they didn't look very comfortable. And you have to ask, why would a 7-year-old girl in Afghanistan be so wrapped by this moment, this experience, that she'd be willing to bleed for it? And I think there's something about that. And maybe it was a sense of, to put it in Tom's terms, it was her body transformed in that moment to someone powerful to someone tall, to someone who had, who was above others for once as a small girl in Afghanistan. And, I can't help but think that whether it's stilts or juggling balls or, some rope tricks or any other card tricks even, or the ability to get up on stage with your tribe and perform in front of others, if all of this isn't part of the same set of resilience processes, to build up children from the inside out.
That's a wonderful story, and yeah, I can imagine, I can picture her, feeling empowered and saying, "I'm not getting off of this." This I like it here.
What I wonder though is, I don't know this. I don't know what's happened to her, and I wonder, at some point, she's probably married now. She probably has kids, and I wonder, how does she look back on her time? Does she? And I would hope that when she's facing a challenge in life, she remembers when she was tall and strong, and an emotional repertoire that she can go back and draw strength from. My guess is, just from knowing the little that I knew her, she's probably making stilts for her daughters.
Wonderful. I think those experiences, like with the Native American Sioux people who send their child out, at 13, and this is a kid who's never been away from a group of people in his life. He's always been in the sight of other people. And he goes out into the wilderness, which I think in Lakota, literally translated, means the solitary shrine of self-discovery. That's their word for wilderness. And you go out there and you have this vision of yourself, and you come back, and that becomes a touchstone experience, because you have been in a terrifying situation and you survived and you thrived, and you come back, and as Joseph Campbell says, you're honored as you come back into the village. And I think when things go bad, as they do in our lives, you can go up and touch that feather maybe that you got from that eagle out in the wilderness, and you can remember, I made it. I can make it again. I'm reminded of that story when you talk about that young girl. My God, that's a beautiful story, Zach. That's fantastic.
Good story, Zach. Yes. Could you maybe share a little bit more, Zach, about the process of you being there in Afghanistan, and did you help out building this children's circus? How was that process? How was it? Your expectation of saying, "Hey, I'm going to go there, right, and I'm going to build a circus," versus I'm there and you're actually doing it. How was that process?
Well, it had just started, and it was started by a man named David Mason, and then a woman named Berit Mulhausen also joined on. She was a journalist during the Taliban times, and stayed and worked with David. And then, and so when I came, it was 2005. The circus started in 2002, but they didn't have juggling, they didn't have unicycling really, and they didn't have magic. We did try to start a magic class, but we're waiting on Tom to come for that, or you, Carlos, if you want to come. But
we're up for it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think when I first went in, honestly, I had no idea what I was doing, and my concern was that I was spending $3,000 at the time on my plane ticket, and there was no direct route. It was a very convoluted route to get there, and I thought I probably could just send $3,000 and not go myself, and it would pay for an Afghan teacher to be with the kids, for a lot longer than I could be there with the kids. So I kind of had to justify to myself, what's in it for? I mean, I'm going for myself on some level. Yes, I'm going to help, but I'm also going for myself. Otherwise, financially, it just doesn't make sense based on the economies. So I raised money in addition to try to justify to myself for the circus. And when I got there, I mean, it was a very different world. But teaching juggling, I guess I didn't realize how starved for something like juggling the kids were. In the U.S., I was when I was performing for birthday parties, to be honest, I was performing for people who had means. You know,
Mhm.
I remember performing once for a child of a basketball player on the San Antonio Spurs, and I got up on a 6-foot unicycle juggling machetes, and the kid wasn't impressed. You know, he's like 7 years old, and he's thinking, you know, my dad can shoot a basketball into the basket from halfway point in the court. So anyway, but in Afghanistan, they've never seen anything like this, and it's like something precious, something special, something rare. And you know, they don't have television, at least they didn't then. At least not anything that would appeal to kids. And so it was just so easy. Once I did one little trick, I mean, taking your thumb off, you know, your hand, this simple trick, the kids just went nuts over that. And they started doing it to each other. I mean, I think there's a chance that I introduced the thumb removal trick to Afghanistan. It's for wildfire afterward. Anyway, so it kind of evolved where we started doing juggling competitions where I would have two kids see how long they could juggle for. So it would be, okay, you can do 3 balls. Can you do 3 balls longer than they can do 3 balls? And that was a very simple, you know, appealing task. And then they started really getting into it. Afghans love a good competition. And so then it started evolving to, you know, how long you can do 4 balls, how about 5 balls, and how many tricks can you do? And then when I went away for a year, came back, and all the Afghan teachers had really organized a bigger competition where they invited in judges to a panel of judges to evaluate the kids as they're juggling 3-4 balls and doing different tricks. And then I came back, and then a year later, and they invited the head of the Afghan Olympic Committee to come and be one of the judges. And they had suddenly 10 different TV crews filming them. And Al Jazeera came, and they've been coming every year to film this competition ever since. And the skill levels just kept going up and up and up. And, you know, there were the people who won, there was tears, there was hugging, there was laughing. It was a very big deal. And then it's on national Afghan television every year too. So it has become a kind of source of pride. And I think the moment when I realized this is sort of this juggling and circus stuff has really gone beyond anything I could have imagined is when I went out to central Afghanistan, a remote area called Bamyan. I was there for work and on another job, and there was this there was actually a marathon there at the same time. It was an Afghan marathon, if you can believe it, in central Afghanistan. So after the marathon, I was asked by the organizers to entertain people while they were waiting on all the finishers to come in. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever run a marathon, you know that there's a long waiting time at the end, you know, for all the different people of all different conditions.
Yeah.
And so there's quite a bit of time. So I picked up 5 rocks, and I started juggling 5 rocks. And the second I dropped 1 rock, a little girl who must have been, you know, up to my waist, comes over to me, literally pushes me aside while people are watching, and says, "That's not how you juggle. Let me show you how you juggle." In Dari. And she throws the most beautiful 5-ball cascade pattern I have ever seen.
Oh.
And then her friend comes over to her, pushes her aside, and says, "Let me show you how to juggle." And then she throws up a 5-ball cascade. These are beautiful. And I have to realize, like, these students are students of my students. There was, you know, and they were like, you know, "Who are you, you foreigner? Let us show you what we can do."
So cool.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So cool. That's so nice how that, you know, a seed was planted, and then, you know, it grew, and it gives them that, you know, empowerment feeling that, hey, yeah, I can do that. I can do that too. And look at me, I can do it. That's such a great story. That's such a great story. Oh, I love that. And when you said you were there and the circus was started and all of this, what was the time period? So you went on in 2005. How long did you stay there, and how many times have you gone since?
So I went in 2005 for 3 months. Then I went back the next summer, and then I went back the summer after that. And I got a. I was really lucky, and the university, when I was in divinity school, there was a generalized university grant that where they gave me money to travel for 1 year to go back to Afghanistan and study more about the circus, and study also. I also was interested in laughter patterns and studying measuring laughter as an indicator of psychosocial resilience. So I went back for then a year, and then and I stayed there for several years, and then I moved back to the U.S. to start to do a doctorate in psychology before, and then when I finished my coursework, I again moved back to Afghanistan and was there for another 3-4 years. So off and on every year, several times a year between 2005 and 2017. And in 2017, I've decided to I've come back to the U.S. to be a little bit more normal.
More normal.
How's that gone?
Yeah, I'm failing miserably, Tom.
Well, we're going to do something about that, you and me. Any other questions, Carlos?
I mean, that sounds such amazing stories. Have you seen it grow? How you went there in the beginning, and now you've seen all the iterations of it. It's just so, wonderful, because for me, I got into this whole thing because of that experience at the circus. I do juggling, so you see my little juggling balls there. I got here on a wall that I'll show you maybe later. I got a wall of 9 clubs that I keep because I love juggling as well. Juggling was my first, performance love. I love the way that it looks. I think it looks beautiful. I think it's mesmerizing. I think it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do something amazing at juggling. It's very easy to do some basic juggling, but the step up, it's very hard. I think it's very, very, very hard, as in many performances, but it's just so visual. So I love it. I love this stories from Zach, and I'm looking forward to imagining how it would look for Magicians Without Borders and in Afghanistan kind of thing, if we can muster something up.
I hope so. Life is long. And, Afghanistan may or may not become safe in the future. There's a lot of really tricky stuff going on right now politically, but the circus has continued to expand and grow. And in fact, it's, the coronavirus has affected funding because a lot of international donors are drawing down their funds. And that's affected programs in a big way. And a number of the teachers have had to be laid off. But a number of the teachers who are laid off have decided that they're going to start their own circuses locally. So, it'll continue.
That's a good sign.
I just wonder, Zach. Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, before we go, I just wanted to acknowledge Michael, who's always here with us, and he wanted to say, if you can share something real quick about what do you find out about laughter patterns, maybe something that you can sum up of your research, because it sounds pretty interesting.
Let's see. Well, something interesting about laughter. Oh, yes. Well, okay. There's a lot that can be said. That's the problem. When you become an academic, everything you say is suddenly, you don't speak in sentences anymore. You speak in paragraphs and 3.5 essays. On laughter, I've learned one of probably the biggest takeaways that laughter is a method of communication. And that most laughter doesn't come from jokes. It comes from and it's the same across all cultures. But if you were to go to a restaurant and just listen to people laughing, you'll find that if you turn the words that they're saying into a script, it's really, really boring and really dull. It's like, "Hey, Tom, so good to see you. Ha ha ha. It's been so long. Ha ha ha." right? It's not really about it's not punny or witty. It's about communicating affect. I like you. I want to be with you. I'm enjoying myself. I feel safe with you. And so I think that's probably a big takeaway. And so by measuring what I was doing in Afghanistan, one of the things was measuring. Basically, I was just, if you set up a camera, for example, and you're measuring children in a play space, you can kind of figure out algorithmically how happy they are just by how often and how safe they feel just by measuring how often they laugh. A second way of doing it is measuring how they smile. You know, there's 2 different ways of smiling. You've probably heard. There's technically 50 different types of smiles or more, but the main differentiation that the researchers talk about is what's called a Duchenne smile or a non-Duchenne. A Duchenne smile, named after the Frenchman who studied it, has to do with the crinkling of the eyes over here, which I tend to get because I spend too much time in the sun. But, you know, when you're smiling, your orbicularis oculi right over here crinkle. And that's considered a felt smile or a real smile. Whereas if I just smile like this, I'm not, and there's no crinkle, it's a fake smile, right? But so if you can measure how people are smiling, that's also an indicator of how they feel on the inside. So that's 2 little tidbits I'll share from an academic perspective.
Cool. That's so freaking cool, Zach. So, Tom, you want to talk about more about your adventures with Zach and Salvador?
Well, I just wondered if you had any memories, moments from our time, let's say in India together. I just remember some really amazing moments there, but I just wonder what comes to mind for you. I love hearing about those things. I've been there 20 times or so, but to hear it from through other people's eyes and other people's experience, what comes back to you?
I think the image that I remember over and over and over again is a picture of, or the image of Tom doing a magic trick, maybe opening his hand and suddenly 2 or 3 or 4 sponge balls comes out. Or he would do it in a child's hand where suddenly they open their hand and 5 sponge balls come out. And then he walks away because he's going on to perform for other kids maybe. And those kids privately amongst themselves, they turn to each other and then they try to replicate the trick over and over and over again. So it's, in a way, Tom leaves these little Hansel and Gretel crumbs everywhere he goes where kids are trying to do this magic trick. And so that's the image that comes to mind, and just the sheer incredible bombastic joy that kids feel when they see something amazing. And it's almost like they don't care whether it's real or not. They're just so delighted by the fact that, you know, this little voodoo doll moves up in Tom's hand and then it goes back down. It's the simplest little movement and it causes such squeals of delight. And I just that gives me delight listening to that. So
I'm often amazed that I can take a little Ziploc bag and put 4 or 5 of the goofiest, simplest things in there: a rubber band, a deck of cards, a couple of sponge balls, some coins, and put it in my bag and take it. And there's a 20-minute, half-hour magic show there, anywhere in the world. And it just does not take very much. And that feels like such a gift in my life that came into my life, magic somehow.
If I can mention one little story, which is that in Iran, Tom used to be was it a Vista volunteer? Or no, Peace Corps volunteer.
Peace Corps volunteer.
Peace Corps volunteer in Iran. And so we did this trip to Iran where we connected with with poets. And often Tom would so an Iranian poet might read for us, and then Tom would perform a poem in English with magic. And what I think was so amazing was that many of the people listening couldn't understand what he was saying in English, but they didn't really need to. It was they were listening to the meaning behind the words and the way that he was communicating that through magic. And Yeah, it was just really delighting to watch men with very long beards and very stern faces just turn into little children again, over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's particularly delightful, turning really severe men into 6-year-old little boys. You know, that's one of the great tricks.
Certainly. Have you seen, Zach, any what's the word, similarities, between the audience when they see a juggling show, in, for example, the shows that we've done with Magicians Without Borders in El Salvador versus in Afghanistan? Can you talk a little bit about that, similarities, differences?
Yeah, I mean in El Salvador, so the camps that Magicians Without Borders runs there, Campamento, and I think one of the biggest similarities that I saw between that and the Afghan circus was this sense of teaching something that can't be stolen or taken away, and teaching something that gives you a sense of specialness. Like because I think when kids do a circus trick, or when kids do a magic trick, it's almost like they have gold in their hands. They have something that's valuable. They have something where there's a proportionality. If they spend more time practicing, they get better, and it's a currency that doesn't get devalued. And not only that, there's ownership and accumulation. You can actually accumulate more and more skills, more and more tricks. So there's this intense desire, both in Afghanistan and in El Salvador, for example, where the students in the programs were really hungry for a new trick. They want to invest in that trick and make it good, but they were also hungry for accumulating. And ownership is something where if you're in a random, uncertain environment, and that's war, or that's living among gangs, or the potential for gangs to interfere with your safety and your family at any time, then the predictability and the proportionality and the mastery of magic and circus, in my view, are the same. And I just see that over and over again in the kids, individual stories of the kids. It's sort of a printing on their bones and in their body of this of I don't know what you want to call it, but I don't know, of a dance of the hands.
Nice.
I love the way you're talking about it as something that they have, that there's just so much loss and so much tragedy often in a place like El Salvador, or in a war zone, like Afghanistan, that this is something that can't be really lost, that it's as you just said, it's in their bones. And that's such a powerful thing.
There's, in Japan, there's an art called otedama, which is effectively like a combination of juggling and jacks. If you look up otedama, you'll find it. It's kind of unique. And only older women in Japan know how to do this, because it used to be taught in all the schools. But if you ask any Japanese families who have a grandmother or an elderly woman who do otedama, you'll find that they really cherish that skill. Here, they learned it when they were a kid, 60, 70 years ago, but they still know how to do it. And it's this like kind of precious, it's almost like it's just a really precious secret skill almost. And it kind of marks them as a generation, but it has to do with something they were given as a child. It was never taken away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's so cool. And I'm thinking, when you're saying these things, I'm picturing the kids in our education chapters, and how you're describing them, right? How you're describing how that sense of uncertainty that they have around their lives, and all that volatility. How do you say that? How volatile their environment is, right? And how it might change in an instant. But when they get into learning something like magic, they start, wanting to, not hoard it, but keep it, safeguard it, right? And make sure that something that makes them, right? I don't know how to articulate this, but yeah, like it makes them.
Yeah, I think that it seems like, children in war experience repeatedly loss, repeatedly abandonment, repeatedly humiliation. When they try to own something, their hand is slapped, metaphorically speaking. And even skills are often useless because they see, you may be a doctor, but you need to drive a taxi, or, you maybe learn how to do tailoring, and weave clothing, but then the Chinese market comes and, you can't compete with that, so you've lost your job. So over time, if you have this sense of humiliation over and over again, and a sense of loss over and over again, you have no drive to own anything. You have no belief that you can have something of value and have it. And so, circus skills are something where it is a kind of intrinsic. I don't know why, but it has an intrinsic value. Kids they want to be able to do this. They see Tom doing a trick, and they want to do the trick. I see a kid juggling, and they want to juggle. And so it's a very kind of binary, simplistic way of thinking. I want to do that. I want to, and then they try it, and they realize, oh, there's nuance, there's complexity, they can, and then their sense of motivation drives them, and I don't know how to. I'm not sure. I'm sort of rambling at this point, but
no, that's great. That's good.
But it sounds so eloquent.
There's another question. I know we're kind of out of time, but if we could do we have another like minute and a half or so, Carlos?
From my end, yes. I'm worried about Zach, but yeah.
I just wanted to go back to that little girl on the stilts for a moment, and you had said it was more than just distraction or something from the difficulties of her life. And there were so many times the kids, our original group of kids in El Salvador, who are very, very poor. And I would ask them, why do you like doing magic? And sometimes they would say, while I'm doing magic, I'm not thinking about my life. I'm somewhere else. And that sounds like a kind of distraction, but I think it's more than that. I think it's not just dissociation, or it's not just distraction. I think they go to some place of possibility or some place of imagination. I don't know. What do you think about that, Zach?
I think that's a great way to explain it. I think it creates a kind of psychological. I'm just using the word ownership, which, but it creates a psychological wallet for them.
Yeah.
And if you're poor, but you know how to make a pencil levitate, or a coin move from one hand to another magically. In a way, it's telling you new narratives. I am not poor. I'm not downtrodden. I'm not humiliated. I'm the one who has something.
Yeah.
I have something of value. I have something that other people can't do. And I have something that's special, and other people look at me and they want it, but they can't take it away from me.
Yeah.
And it tells it's a way of having a new narrative about yourself, because the truth is, magic makes you rich, in my view. Maybe not financially, certainly
Right.
not financially.
Just introducing that idea of a new narrative, a new story, I think is opens up a whole other powerful way of thinking about it as well. So I think that's
wonderful.
Wonderful note.
Wonderful. Zach, this conversation it has been so stimulating, so inspiring. I wish we could do this for longer. I want to be mindful of your time and everybody's, and I hope this is not the last time that we see each other through here. But before we leave, Zach, I always ask this question last. So, I would like you to think, Zach. Do you think that Zach Warren, is a different person because of the social work that you have done in Afghanistan, in El Salvador, and in India? And if so, in what way?
Absolutely. I think gosh, am I a different person? I'm different in so many ways. I can't even begin to describe. But I feel rich. I feel really rich on the inside, from the stories of transformation. And it, I don't know. I just know that if I kick the bucket tomorrow, I'll have a smile on my face, thinking about the moments of joy and transformation from Afghanistan, and some moments with Tom in El Salvador and India, and I hope for many more to come. But it's rare. It's rare, I think, in life that you get to touch other people's lives in a really profound way. And honestly, all I did was act as a switchboard. Somebody gave me the juggling virus, and then I gave the virus to some other people, and then they spread it among themselves. But I guess I was a strategic virus. And I feel really blessed to have played a small part in the spread of joy and laughter through circus art in Afghanistan.
I love that story of being in central Afghanistan and juggling and dropping a ball, and that little girl coming up and saying, "Yo, gringo, out of here. I'll show you how to do it." Just brilliant. Just brilliant. Oh.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time and
God,
podcast.
We're not finished. We're not finished, Zach.
Okay.
You and me. Okay.
I hope this is the beginning of a new chapter of this collaboration. So thank you, Zach, so much. Thank you, Tom, and everybody.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Carlos. Bless you all.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.